Part 37. Global Copy, My Talent is Called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 361. Lu Zhenhua was sweating on his forehead. Although this barrier was jointly created by several of them, he was naturally familiar with the rules contained in it. But it was still extremely difficult for him to reverse the hidden methods that those people had planned. But Wang Yanran's purpose of keeping him outside the realm was already obvious. It's nothing more than wanting him to stay here and release the contestants in the barrier from the barrier. Although he didn't know why Wang Yanran was so nervous about the players in the barrier, he had no choice but to do what the other player wanted. After all, most of the people trapped inside are adventurers from the Dragon Kingdom. If anything goes wrong, it will be the Dragon Kingdom itself that suffers. Just when he connected with the power of rules and prepared to reverse the settings in the barrier and open it, an incomparable power spread from the inside out. This originally strong and solid barrier was instantly defeated like a chicken or a dog under the impact of this magnificent mysterious force. This is such a large-scale and mysterious and domineering power of rules. Even Lu Zhenhua, a strong man in the sun, could not help but be moved by it. He watched in stunned silence as the barrier in front of him shattered, and then all the power seemed to be swallowed up by an invisible giant mouth, quickly converged, and finally dissipated invisible. There were only 5 contestants left standing who were dressed in uniform and looked very handsome. It is the Forbidden Peak team composed of Lu Zhaoqi and others. Lu Zhenhua was stunned. The barrier created by the 9 sun powers using countless rare materials was actually cracked from the inside out. Doesn't this mean that they already have the power to compete with the 9 powerful Sun Yao warriors? He pointed tremblingly at the 5 people who came out. I. How can it be? Who are you? Only 5 people can break the barrier created by the rules of the 9 sun powers. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Possessed by the Prime Minister. Of course, if he knew that it was not 5 people who broke the barrier, but Lu Zhaoqi who did it with just 1 person, he would probably feel that these 100 years have been in vain. In fact, it is not surprising that Lu Zhaoqi can do this. He just did one thing. That is to release the pure land of bliss in his body in a liberating manner. It has been mentioned before that after Lu Zhaoqi and Qinji merged, they had 2 forms. One is based on human beings. The city is hidden in Lu Zhaoqi's body, and all the mysteries are also hidden in his body. The other one is based on the city. Lu Zhaoqi summons the city from the body. Lu Zhaoqi has never tried the second form before, because once the city is liberated, the amazing changes will definitely alarm everyone. Because the moment the city appears, the place where Lu Zhaoqi is will be turned into the realm of pure land of bliss, and the covered land will be filled with rules exclusive to the city. Even in the wilderness, this kind of change would be difficult to hide from the perception of top adventurers. However, he was trapped in this barrier. In order to compete with the power of the barrier's rules, Lu Zhaoqi had no choice but to bring out such a powerful weapon. Under his urging, the city began to exert its extraordinary power beyond the mythical level. The rules that the barrier originally used to restrain the contestants were shattered. The power of rules in the barrier are all younger brothers in front of the arrogant and unreasonable power of the city. After finishing speaking, he paused again, as if he had just come to his senses and thought, why should I tell the young man this? Me, an excited smile appeared on Lu Zhaoqi's face. Of course I'm going to support the dean. Damn it, this young man. Damn it. Before he finished speaking, he had already activated the power of the rules, used all his strength, and managed to open a small opening from the boundary of Wang Yanran's domain and got in. After all, out of the 9 strong Sun Yao warriors in the room, there was only this old guy. The others were all handsome men and beauties, so he was naturally very impressed. When he came to his senses, he hurriedly said, "The situation is now dangerous. You should leave here quickly and inform XXX outside." a mountain of people formed almost instantly. In addition, there were several guys who were secretly marked by him, and he also sealed them in the pure land of paradise. Perhaps it is because a few people have been in the fog for a short time and are still conscious, while others have had their five senses sealed by the power of rules and fell into a deep sleep. Lu Zioqi waved his hand and used the power of the pure land of paradise to bring everyone into the city. Zhang Yang and Lu Yang, who were still awake, were pulled by him and brought out of the barrier together. Well, that's right. Hurry up and notify the relevant departments according to Mr. Liu's wishes, and take all these guys away for me. While Lu Zioqi was trolling, she turned back to Lu Zhenhua and explained, Mr. Lu, we are contestants from Imperial College. Lu Zhenhua was also shaken by Lu Zioqi's operation, and murmured distractedly, the audience has been evacuated. And Lu Zioqi also recognized the old man in front of her. Knowing that he is the strong man of the sun from the Dragon Kingdom. Of course, Zhao Sueking, who had an extraordinary relationship with him, was left in the city by him. Moreover, he did not feel any hostility from the other party and understood that he was not the traitor he was looking for. Wang Yanran is at war with other Sun Yao experts. These are the contestants who were temporarily included in the pure land of paradise by him, and he released them in this form. Excuse me, what happened outside? Where are the others? Lu Zioqi broke the rules of the barrier and discovered all the contestants imprisoned in the fog. Lu Zioqi shook his sleeves, and as if he had used magical powers such as the universe in his sleeves, countless adventurers who had fallen into coma squirted out of his sleeves. What are you looking at? It's you. Lu Yang. Hurry up and recruit your robots to work. After listening to his words, Zhang Yang subconsciously said, then what do you do? Lu Zioqi raised her eyebrows, turned around and slapped Zhang Yang on the shoulder, shouting, don't be in a daze. Get to work. As soon as he came out of the barrier, Lu Zioqi immediately took the city back, creating the situation Lu Zhenhua had just seen. Lu Zioqi said briefly, revealed her identity, and then asked. Zhao Sueking, Dadeome, Zhang Yang, and others are also among them. I know he is one of my own. No moles, start trading. He was almost pushed by him all the way. Now that the barrier has been broken, it's time for me to do what I should do. The Forbidden Peak team was left dumbfounded by the sudden news. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 362. The so-called field is naturally a kind of practice after Sun Yao. If you want to become Sun Yao, you must understand the rules and control them. And in the stage after Sun Yao, you must learn to change the rules and create rules. The field is a prototype that emerged from taking steps in this direction. The principle is also very simple, it is to open up a small world and fill it with the rules that you control. Because the rules of this small world were completely shaped by the strong Sun Yao himself, he can almost be regarded as the creation god in this world. Although this field is strong, it is difficult to use it in battles of the same level, because not only you have the field, but others also have it. What's more, under normal circumstances, activating the field is a very troublesome thing. It does not mean that you can use it if you want. It requires the user to mobilize energy in advance to resonate with the field. This process is similar to accumulating energy. This is very clumsy, as stupid as loading bullets in front of an enemy holding a rifle. Wang Yanran's domain seemed to have reached a fairly mature stage, so she summoned the domain almost instantly. And he calls on the power of the domain to drag others directly into his territory. But that doesn't mean the battle is settled. Because they are both strong in the sun, the other party is also qualified to resist the power of Wang Yanran's domain. Even if he is passively pulled into his own domain by Wang Yanran, he can still use the power of rules to resist. Although the contest between the two sides will eventually be won by the pure and powerful side with the power of the rules, it will definitely be a tragic victory. After all, if you fight in your own home, whether you lose or win, the damaged furniture will definitely belong to you. All in all, using the power of the field is almost equivalent to killing 800 enemies and losing 1,000-3,000 in a battle of the same level. Wang Yanran naturally knew this. She didn't want to make a mess in her field if she could help it, but she had no choice. In front of tens of millions of ordinary people in the imperial capital, her sacrifice was worth it. At this moment, Lu Zhenhua was struggling to pass through Wang Yanran's domain barrier and enter her domain. He was severely injured and had yet to heal. He was so exhausted after doing this that he almost collapsed on the ground. He adjusted his breathing for a while and did not recover. His own strength was far inferior to that of Wang Yanran, and now he spent all his strength to forcefully break into the opponent's territory, which was very tiring for him. Wang Yanran's field has created a dreamland like a fairy tale world. The sky is filled with colorful glaze colors, and there are clouds everywhere that look like cotton candy. On the edge of the green grassland is a meandering river. The water is crystal clear, and sometimes kawaii big-headed fish jump out of the water and happily spit bubbles. This was the dreamy scene Lu Zhenhua was seeing now. He did not express any opinion except for the slight twitching of the corners of his eyes. How to say? It can be seen that this big girl who is over 100 years old still maintains her childlike innocence. Before he could catch his breath, he heard a rather impatient voice coming from behind him. "Mr. Lu, how long do we have to rest? If it doesn't work, why don't you take a rest and show me the way?" Lu Zhenhua was startled, turned over and got up, only to find that there was a familiar figure standing behind him. He was one of the contestants who had broken through the barrier on his own before. "Lu Zioki? How did you get in?" He refined some of the 5-color sacred stones, and his magic power contained the supreme power of breaking magic 4 rules of this level. It can only be said that he can grasp it with his hands. "You didn't tell me earlier." At this time, Lu Zhenhua's voice came faintly. "I forgot to remind you, the laws here still prohibit flying." Therefore, he was self-taught and immediately mastered the method of entering this space. But he can always make some actions that are beyond ordinary people's expectations, such as breaking through the restrictions of the barrier on his own, or entering this field. Lu Zhenhua was a little surprised and couldn't understand the handsome young man in front of him at all. "Hey," Lu Zhenhua just wanted to stop him, but Lu Zioki's movements were so fast that he had no time to react. So after sensing this power, Lu Zioki immediately understood the nature of this power. Although he didn't know that this was the power of the domain, he unexpectedly realized that the nature of this power was surprisingly similar to the power of the city lord he possessed. After learning where Wang Yanran was, Lu Zioki left without hesitation. Lu Zhenhua was a little confused. That's right, Lu Zioki's Pure Land of Bliss is essentially a field-level supermodel prop. At this point, everyone should have understood it. This was the scene just now. The next moment, Lu Zioki, who had only been handsome for 3 seconds, was severely crushed by a powerful force of rules and fell into the grass. So, he rushed in with the mana shield on his head. Moreover, the power of this field is far more complete than the prototype of the field that Wang Yanran and others independently developed by crossing the river by feeling the stones. It's simply crushing. Since this young man has no way to distinguish Wang Yanran's location, this shows that he has the strength to break through the sky, which is the peak of Yuhui. He has a slight understanding of the power of rules. After Lu Zhenhua looked at him intently for a while, he decided to tell him Wang Yanran's location. But Lu Zioki is an exception. The power of rules here has long been disrupted by the fighting of several people, turning into a terrifyingly powerful turbulence. Anyone who has not mastered the power of rules will be torn to pieces by this terrifying power of rules in just an instant. He spat out the grass in his mouth with a few mouthfuls, then activated the 4 poles power, turning into a wisp of breeze and rushing forward. Definitely not reaching Sun Yao level. This is like a high school student returning to elementary school to do the 4 arithmetic operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. In fact, after Lu Jianhua tore apart the space, Lu Zhaoqi felt an extremely familiar power. We can't say they are the same, we can only say they are exactly the same. Lu Zhaoqi. One must have at least a Sun Yao level of strength to clearly distinguish the differences between the powers of the rules and determine the position of others. What if I said take the stairs? His aura doesn't look like a Sun Yao level adventurer. How could he possibly break through the barriers in the realm? Not long after, he heard a huge roar. In this field filled with the power of rules, it is not as simple as imagined to sense the location of other people. Lu Zhaoqi tilted her head and thought for a while, but finally decided not to complain, but changed the subject and said, "It's not important. Tell me where they are." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 363. Boom. As soon as Lu Zhaoqi rushed into the battlefield, she was hit by a shockwave and was almost pressed to the ground by the strong power of rules. Fortunately, he had quick eyesight and quick hands, and he used the power of the rules he understood to offset the power of the rules with a backhand forced vibration of the knife. This gave him time to see the situation clearly. Then he was stunned. The 7 people on the field were seen running away in a panic. Wang Yanran summoned countless puppets and killed them randomly on the field. Countless mysterious spells fell from the sky, and I also appeared elusively behind the 7 people, attacking the opponent from unexpected angles. With 1 against 7, they beat each other down. Could it be that you are the legendary 1 against 7? Why don't you go to heaven? Looking at the posture, Lu Zhaoqi wanted to rush up and take their collars, and yell at them, 7 against 1, and you are being suppressed and beaten, do you know how to play? But the good times didn't last long. Who can become a strong person in the sun without 2 brushes? Rabbits bite people when they are in a hurry, let alone these guys who are not easy to deal with in the first place. I saw the blonde man who was being cared for by Wang Yanran roaring angrily, his whole body bursting with momentum, and his whole body seemed to expand. He punched out, just in time to meet Wang Yanran's light palm. After the blow, Wang Yanran retreated, but the blonde man shook his body, and then shook again, and then again. After 3 consecutive earthquakes, his whole body's momentum suddenly collapsed. Then he yelled, "Do it!" Before he finished speaking, Chen Changshen miraculously appeared behind Wang Yanran. But Wang Yanran didn't seem to notice, and her body collided with the opponent's sword. Blood flowed. Wang Yanran's extremely beautiful face was finally slightly distorted, as if she was feeling unbearable pain. At the most critical moment, she finally reacted, shaking out the afterimage with her hands and facing the long sword. But after all, the opponent was waiting for work, deliberately and unintentionally. After a few dizzying exchanges, Chen Changshen grunted, his face turned pale, and he quickly retreated. As a price, Wang Yanran's left arm was pierced by the sword. Although this incident happened in the blink of an eye, all the people on the scene were top-notch warriors. How could they fail to seize such an excellent fighting opportunity? Almost instantly, the remaining 5 people launched a fierce counter-attack towards Wang Yanran at the same time. The power of various rules mixes together to form a huge storm, attacking everyone regardless of friend or foe. While everyone was resisting the storm of rules, the blonde man who had regained his breath showed a ferocious but cruel smile. His name is Gordon. As the most powerful solar adventurer in the United States, has he ever suffered such humiliation? Being treated as a soft persimmon by a woman and beaten violently with almost no power to fight back. If this matter was revealed, How could he hold his head high and behave like a human being? Fortunately, this woman outnumbered many and finally ignored his hidden methods. Although he has thick eyebrows and big eyes, and his moves are wide open and closed, he seems to be easy to deal with, but in fact, he has mastered an extremely insidious power of rules. Using the first impression others form on him, once he uses it, he is almost always unfavorable. So, Wang Yanran, take the move. You will definitely fall under the fists of my Gordon today. He shouted loudly, and the strange power that had just been blasted into Wang Yanran's body while the two were fighting was instantly detonated by him. This strange power not only targeted Wang Yanran's body, but also burned her soul. This sudden explosion seemed to ignite an inextinguishable fire in Wang Yanran's soul. Wang Yanran was responding to the attacks of several people, but she was so plotted. She immediately groaned, her orifices were bleeding, and the movements of her hands slowed down. Good chance. Several people seized the opportunity and immediately launched a fatal blow towards her. Wang Yanran was unable to respond quickly and was immediately hit in the body by the crowd, causing her to fall on the spot. As she suffered heavy losses, the field also experienced fluctuations and became unstable. Gordon's eyes lit up, he seized the opportunity, and fiercely rushed towards Wang Yanran. His fists were full of strength, vowing to avenge his previous shame and avenge his blow. In the midst of this crisis, the sky formed by this field suddenly lit up. Countless stars shine brightly, forming a dazzling galaxy. A huge beam of light formed by pure and rich star power went straight down, enveloping Wang Yanran. At the same time, Gordon's fist was firmly caught by a pair of slender and powerful hands. Gordon's heart skipped a beat. Drops of sweat instantly appeared on his forehead. Because just at that moment, his eyes were blurred, and the fists he swung inexplicably hid between the palms of this person. The most important thing is that his majestic and explosive power seemed to flow into a huge mouth of an abyss, and was ruthlessly swallowed up. Not good. Alarm bells rang in his head. But before he could react, he was lifted up by a powerful and irresistible force. The most important thing is that he can't think of any resistance. Every muscle and skin on the body seems to be cheering and cooperating with the other party's movements. What? Big question marks popped up in Gordon's little head. The next moment, he took these question marks and divided them into 6, brazenly facing the attack from the remaining 6. The one who took action was naturally Lu Zhaoqi. In fact, he did not conceal his appearance, but the energy fluctuations he emitted did not attract the attention of these people at all. One reason is because Wang Yanran puts too much pressure on them. Secondly, it was also because Lu Zhaoqi's strength was almost no threat to them. Clearly, they were wrong. Although Lu Zhaoqi's realm has not yet reached the same level as theirs, there are many ways to defeat him. Stars shine plus forced vibration of the sword plus extreme swordsmanship plus God's left hand plus everything is allowed. Instant, no CD. Even while Lu Zhaoqi continued to inspire stars shining, there was still time to put a layer of divine protection on Wang Yanran and herself. 2 elves, one green and one purple, were spinning happily in circles above their heads, which greatly enhanced their panel attributes. But Gordon was not very happy here. Not only was Lu Zhaoqi using forced vibration sword to forcefully catch his attack, but he also got stuck in a bug and used the extreme kendo characteristic everything can be a sword as a weapon to be forcibly attacked by God's left hand. It's a Turan. This was not over yet. The next second, Lu Zhaoqi regarded it as a flying sword and threw it out. Mixed with the effects of forced vibration sword and all things allowed, it collided with the attacks of the other 6 people. In fact, as long as he is given a little time, he can resist Lu Zhaoqi's skills by using the power of rules. But who would have expected that this kid is so young but so capable? His skills are simply unbelievable. Unprepared, even the strong Sun Yao can only hold their noses and suffer this depressing loss. So, Gordon got the lunch like this. Everything is allowed. The clones that were separated collided with the attacks of the other 5 people, and the damage was offset on the spot and dissipated. However, Gordon's body directly faced Chen Changshen's sword due to Lu Xiaoqi's calculation. I have to mention it. Let's not talk about the character of this Dragon Kingdom sword god, but his sword is a genuine sword. Extremely sharp. Gordon was directly penetrated from head to tail by the sword. This cannot be described as heartwarming or exhilarating. I can only describe the previous sentence as a miserable word. Even a strong Sun Yao man can't help but do this. What's more, this long sword also contains terrifying rules that are like the Great Destruction. It directly invaded Gordon's body and crushed his soul to pieces, which was no better than his soul being scattered. So the next moment, under Chen Changshen's dull eyes, Gordon's feet twitched and he died with hatred on the spot. This self-esteemed American adventurer was the first to die. Global copy. My talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 364. Gordon. Seeing this scene, Emily, who is also a Japanese adventurer from the United States, immediately became red-eyed. The two have known each other decades ago, and they are both adventurers in the sun. They have fought together countless times, whether in the kitchen, the living room, or the balcony, and they are extremely familiar with each other. Seeing this close comrade receiving the lunch box, she was immediately carried away by rage. She opened her hands, and a huge bow taller than a human appeared in her hands. As soon as the virtual string was drawn, a force of rules that destroyed the world condensed into an arrow on the bow, locking the culprit of all this, Lu Xiaoqi. Almost in the blink of an eye, Emily gathered her momentum. The light arrow left the string, seemed to shatter the void, and arrived in front of Lu Xiaoqi almost in an instant. However, Lu Xiaoqi showed no fear in the face of such attacks. Although he was a little surprised that the speed of the arrow was so fast that he had almost no room to react, but with his various resurrection abilities, he did not panic at all. Well, it would be more perfect if the legs didn't shake. But before he could deal with the arrow, a hand seemed to hit the arrow slowly and quickly. With a flick of his finger, the light arrow containing the power of destroying the world turned into dots and dissipated invisible. "You're so slow." Wang Yanran's complaining tone sounded in Lu Xiaoqi's ears, as if it was a coquettish accusation between lovers. Lu Xiaoqi couldn't help but shudder and gave her a strange look. Is this person really Wang Yanran? It doesn't look like it. Moreover, how did she know that I would definitely come? Lu Xiaoqi had too many questions in her mind, but it was obviously not the time to ask this at this moment. The two just looked at each other and turned their attention to the remaining 6 people in perfect agreement. Chen Changshen, the big mistake has not yet been made, you still have room to turn back. Wang Yanran's red lips parted slightly, and her faint voice spread throughout the audience, beginning to shake the morale of the soldiers. In fact, the opponent's military morale is indeed a bit unstable. After all, the 7 of them didn't do anything to Wang Yanran, but let the other party wait for support, not to mention that now they had lost a general inexplicably. 6 on 2 or even 6 on 3. Can win? But the other party was obviously only slightly flustered, and then Emily, the only Sunpower strongman left in the United States, shouted sternly, "If you don't take action, don't talk about cooperation in the future." As soon as she finished speaking, she heard an old voice speaking faintly. "Hey, you are too anxious." Wang Yanran's face suddenly darkened. This was obviously her home court, but she had never sensed the presence of anyone else besides the 10 of them, Juri Yao and Lu Xiaoqi. The appearance of this old man's voice showed that the current situation was completely beyond her control. I saw the shadows of several strong Sun Yao men quickly lengthening and converging together, and then a figure slowly rose from the shadows. He raised his hand and launched his ultimate move, 10,000 swords returned to the sect. This figure was wearing a bamboo hat, holding a scepter, and his whole body was covered with airtight, exuding an indescribable evil power. Seem. And he said to Wang Yanran, "Leave him to me. To put it bluntly, he is a little paike in the Yuehui realm. I wonder how they managed to hide the great prophecy from me." "It turns out you were the one behind it," Wang Yanran suddenly realized, and then frowned. "You appeared in front of me like this because you really weren't afraid that I would kill you directly and let you will the cult be completely disbanded?" Lu Zioqi could clearly see that although this man's power was strange, in essence it was the same as him and had not broken through to the Sun Yao level. She had a look of shock on her face, but a few people who had been well prepared caught the flaw and blasted her in one fell swoop. Wang Yanran's domain was shattered. Although his skills have also lost the blessing of many rules, their own power has reached an earth-shattering level. "Just try it. Then come and try it," the old man laughed, not afraid at all. The barrier blessed by the power of the evil god cannot be shaken by an adventurer at the level of cricket Yuehui. Not only the rules of the wind, but all the rules of everything have been forced to press pause. This is the big killer weapon that everyone specially prepared for her. But under the intersection of the two forces, his face suddenly changed drastically. Although he looked down on him with his hat on, you could feel the panic and helplessness in his heart from his sudden panic movements. The evil god's staff that can imprison rules and represents the supreme authority of God. Lu Zioqi's eyes lit up, and she suddenly remembered the bead that the cultists wanted to snatch in the barrier. The wind has stopped. In fact, it is not that the wind has stopped, but that the rules representing the wind have been completely banned. Lu Zioqi's attack also arrived. The immortal sword, shining with colorful colors, struck the bishop without any reservation. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Zioqi took action without hesitation. This moment and this mysterious aura made Lu Zioqi feel somewhat familiar. The scepter in his hand lightly stomped on the ground, and an invisible and strange wave spread throughout the audience. Yes, the breath is exactly the same. Facing Lu Zioqi's act of firing without saying a word, the other party did not panic at all. Even when he saw that the 6 people on his side had been intercepted by Wang Yanran, the evil bishop was still as steady as an old dog. Attacked by 6 adventurers of the same level, Wang Yanran was completely defeated on the spot without any defense. The evil god bishop. He didn't even have a chance to ask for help. The seemingly impregnable and unshakable barrier shattered under Lu Zioqi's sword. After losing the blessing of the power of rules, the sunlight powerhouse has become no different from the ordinary moonlight realm. The evil god bishop originally didn't care about Lu Zioqi, and he only raised a magic barrier when facing the attack. Boom! Boom! At the same Yuehui level, Mr. Lu really deserves to be worthy of anyone else. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 365. Needless to say, the power of Lu Zioqi's immortal sword is needless to say. So far, there are only 2 people who can take on his sword without dying. One is Digi, who is practicing in seclusion inside his body. Her original realm is beyond the Sun Yao level, and the other is the bald donkey with extremely weird methods. When Lu Zioqi fought against him, she always felt like she was not fighting against one person. Although the evil bishop looked awesome, he was not able to survive by taking advantage of Lu Zioqi's skills. In fact, after Lu Zioqi's 1,000 swords returned to the sect, he didn't even have to deal with the subsequent damage, and he was already reduced to ashes. Only a dim evil staff was left on the spot. This also made Lu Zioqi a little speechless. Originally, he was still a little unclear about the other party's reality. Seeing that he ignored her so much, he thought he had some extraordinary abilities. Is this the result? That's it? If possible, Lu Zioqi really wanted to pull him back with a big resurrection spell, and then grabbed his collar and asked him, "Why don't you avoid it?" "Because you're not afraid." Unfortunately, Lu Zioqi has not yet learned the skill to resurrect the dead who have been turned into powder. The only ones he can resurrect are the targets he has cast holy protection in advance. For example, Wang Yan ran now. Yes, at the other end of the field, Lu Zhaoqi killed the evil god bishop instantly with one blow. On the other hand, Wang Yan ran was beaten by several people together and was unable to fight back. Almost instantly, he was seriously injured and on the verge of death. This is not because she is useless, but after losing the power of rules, facing a group of 5 men and 1 woman, even if she is extremely talented, she is still restricted and cannot use it at all. More importantly, this rule was too sudden, and she was caught off guard, and she was already at a disadvantage. As the saying goes, if you make one wrong move, you lose everything. She lost the opportunity and was naturally beaten by others. Even before Lu Zhaoqi came to help, Wang Yanran was mercilessly cut off by the sword god who also belonged to the Dragon Kingdom, cutting off his arm and amputating his head. Wang Yanran's eyes dimmed immediately. Lu Zhaoqi's sacred protection was about to activate, but because the power of the rules was imprisoned by the evil god's staff, it failed strangely. The 2 elves fluttered twice, but in the end they failed to activate the power of resurrection, and had no choice but to turn into light spots and float away. The next moment, Wang Yanran's stumps were hit by the attacks from the following people, and disappeared invisible. Could it be said that the first Sun Yao warrior in the Dragon Kingdom fell like this? It's no wonder that these days are ruthless and cruel. In fact, as the world's most powerful person, Wang Yanran's methods are so rich that it makes everyone's scalp numb. Even if they cut off her head, several people are still afraid that she can be resurrected through the unknown means they have reserved. To cut the weeds, we need to get rid of the roots. Naturally, these people would not show mercy to Wang Yanran, who was already an obvious enemy, leaving her with a chance to make a comeback. You deserve to die. When Lu Zhaoqi saw this scene, she couldn't help but get angry and gritted her teeth and shouted. Thousands of swords fired together. Countless swords roared in, launching the most violent attack on the 6 Sun Yao warriors. Even the sword god Chen Changsheng couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he encountered such an attack, and said to himself, "It's interesting." Originally, as a Yuexaiwi level adventurer, Lu Zhaoqi was still not taken seriously by these Sun Yaos even though she had some weird tricks. Even if there is a lesson learned from the past, Gordon fell into his hands. But firstly, Gordon was seriously injured, secondly, everyone's energy was focused on Wang Yanran, and thirdly, Gordon's death was strictly an accidental injury caused by their attack. Coupled with the arrogance of the Sun Yao strongman himself. Due to various factors, they did not regard Lu Zhaoqi as their opponent, thinking that as long as they were serious, this jumping grasshopper would be crushed by them in an instant. As a result, they had just dealt with their own serious problem, when they turned around and ran into Lu Zhaoqi's fatal move. Even a few people who are Riyao are a little confused. Where is that dead old man from the cult? Lu Zhaoqi's eyes spit fire. 365, Brothers, Manual Doghead. To be honest, his inner feelings towards this woman have always been quite complicated. Knowing that now, he rushed into the confines of the rules, that's why he made such a fool of himself. A few Sun Yao warriors were able to deal with it with all their firepower. Directly destroy all the buildings on the field. Instead, one after another 10,000 swords returning to the sect was summoned by him with all his strength. So the focus still has to be on Lu Zhaoqi's side? Lu Zhenhua was outside this range before and didn't know what happened. What's more, this woman also helped him find a way to treat his sister, although it seemed more like an exchange of benefits. The special point is that due to his talent, he relies more on the power of rules than other Sun Yao experts. After all, the power of rules is like the wings of a flying bird to the strong Sun Yao warriors. But now Lu Zhaoqi can't care about so much anymore. And this method is undoubtedly killing the goose that lays the egg. Moreover, this sword has growth attributes. As long as it exists longer, its power will naturally increase. Having lost part of the power of rules, Luzaoki's skills have become less unreasonable and domineering and ruthless than before. The moment he saw Wang Yanran fall, his heart felt a little painful. When he saw her completely beaten into powder, he was like ignited explosives and completely went berserk. Although he, Lu, doesn't feel like falling in love when he sees a beautiful woman, it is natural for him to be fond of beautiful things. Therefore, almost instantly, Luzaoki's mana bottomed out. In other words, when his sword intent value is exhausted, he will fall into a vacuum period with no sword power available. Could it be that he couldn't beat this guy and ran away? Then he stumbled and fell to the ground, with a look of astonishment on his face. Later, the two had a fight, not to mention who was right or wrong, but their relationship became increasingly unusual after all. He just wants to use this endless immortal sword to tear apart the defenses of the opponent's people, and then execute the opponent Ling Qi. It turns out that the scope of the rule-based confinement effect produced by the evil god's staff is not as large as imagined, and it can only cover the battlefield where a few people are fighting. But he had to hold his nose and accept the favor. After all, Luzaoki's current sword intent value is not enough to support the existence of so many immortal swords at the same time for a long time. 3, 5, 9, in an instant, hundreds of sword tornadoes were connected to the sky, forming a majestic momentum that covered the sky and the sun. Wang Yan ran. At this time, Lu Zhenhua rushed to the scene. He saw the scene of Wang Yanran's murder at a glance. He was immediately grief-stricken. He shouted, gritted his teeth and rushed forward, as if he wanted to fight to the death with the other party. Posture. Seeing his friend die tragically in front of him, how can you tell Luzaoki not to be angry? But did you think this was the end? The old man naturally felt very uncomfortable after suddenly losing his wings. The two sides fought fiercely. Stepping into this area restricted by rules, Lu Zhenhua suddenly felt like an old tiger that had lost its claws. It cannot be said that there is no deterrence, but it is only better than nothing. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 366. Not good. Chen Changsheng looked at the endless sword with a heavy expression, which could almost destroy the world. Gazing at the blurry figure in the center of the storm, a hint of haze flashed in his eyes. In terms of swordsmanship, Chen Changsheng undoubtedly surpassed Luzaoki by several blocks. But the talent shown by this kid is far beyond him. After all, Chen Changsheng's talent is only proficiency in swordsmanship, while Luzaoki has several passive abilities, such as Phetian swordsmanship, extreme swordsmanship. Who wouldn't beat him up? He had to admit that if he was at the same level as Yu Hui, there was no way he could be Luzaoki's opponent. As a result, if we let it go, the consequences will be disastrous when this guy reaches the sun level. Thinking of this, the murderous intention in his heart became more and more intense. At that moment, he burst out with an astonishing sword intent and knocked down all the immortal swords around him. He quickly flew back without caring about the other people. The other Sun Yao experts found it extremely difficult to cope with the sword without the help of the power of rules. They were stunned when they saw Chen Changsheng abandoning them and running away. Then he started to curse. Dirty words are extremely unpleasant. But Chen Changsheng ignored it and just said in a deep voice, "Go out and fight." Although it is only 3 short words. But several Sun Yao experts immediately woke up. Yes, now that Wang Yanran is dead, they are the most powerful ones at the moment. So why do they still stay and fight in a place that limits the power of their rules? As long as he walks out of this area restricted by rules, wouldn't it mean to pin this rampant guy to the ground and beat him violently? They had no intention of competing with Luzaoki's Jian Gang anymore and began to think of ways to retreat. Want to run? It's not that easy. The person who said this was none other than Lu Zhenhua. They think clearly, and Lu Zhenhua's reaction is not slow. He's not a fool. Naturally, he knows how to benefit his own situation. Out, it's 6 Riyao vs their side, a severely injured Riyao with residual blood and a young man named Yu Hui. If you stay here, there will be 8 moonlight level battles. Moreover, the combat ability of this young man named Lu Zioqi is obviously far beyond the level of ordinary Yu Hui. With his own assistance, it is not impossible to kill several people. Although I have lost the power of rules, I feel really uncomfortable. But here, our side has the home field advantage. The longer you delay, the more powerful you become. When the Dragon Kingdom reacts and sends more Yuehui warriors to support them, the fight will only become easier. Thinking of this, Lu Zhenhua firmed up his idea, shouted loudly, and rushed towards Chen Changsheng, who rushed out first with the resolution of failure or success. Both sides fight. They fought for several rounds in a blink of an eye. Although Chen Changsheng is already a villain, he is still benign after all. Facing his mentor, he cannot be cruel and can only say in a deep voice, "Master Lu, get out of the way. I promise, I won't take action against anyone else in Dragon Kingdom." Lu Zhenhua didn't bother to pay attention to this kind of traitor. He sneered and continued to attack, using deadly and extremely cruel moves. Love deeply and hate deeply. Of course Lu Zhenhua has different feelings for this sword god of the Dragon Kingdom whom he single-handedly supported. He had to panic, because Lu Zioqi's ultimate move immediately caught up with him. So he drew his sword without hesitation. Faced with this situation, Chen Changsheng could only sigh and said, "In that case, don't blame Chen for being ruthless." And the other side. Lu Zioqi could no longer care about Chen Changsheng, who was almost about to escape, so he could only use his sword to hold him back. Unlike other strong people in the sun, as their cultivation becomes more and more profound, their lifespan becomes longer, and they become younger as they live. In silence, Lu Zhenhua's body paused, his face showed a hint of bitterness, dozens of blood sprays burst out from his body, and he fell to the ground. But deep down he was also complaining secretly. At this point, all he can say is that I am blind. The sword flashed. Who told them to run slowly? Too much. With his current mental strength, he simply cannot control such a huge number of immortal swords. Although his talent is incredible, it still has its limits. At this point, there is nothing that can be done to him. That's why he turned his energy to cultivating the next generation of talents. Unfortunately, because he is indeed unable to control it anymore. It was already shrouded in layers by Lu Zioqi's sword. There are just too many. He is just the opposite. Due to his natural ability, no amount of longevity is enough for him to consume. If he cannot achieve a breakthrough in realm, he will be like a withered bone in a grave, waiting to die. But if he breaks through in realm, he will have to expedite his short lifespan. It's just that the longer he lives, the more clearly he realizes one thing: his qualifications are a bit lacking after all. But in terms of pure combat power, he was still more than one step behind his opponent, and his life-saving style of play still had no effect on the opponent. Chen Changsheng was his most promising candidate before. If it had been 180 years earlier, he would still have the determination to live towards death. Billions of immortal swords are close at hand. Lu Zioqi could only divide her mind into 2 parts now, and one of them focused heavily on these Sun Yao Wei nuts. What he did in the heat of the moment, he could only hold his nose and endure this frustrating loss. In fact, without anyone noticing, he has cancelled many of the newly formed 10,000 swords returning to the sect. On the other side, although Lu Zioqi was magnificent, his sword was endless. Although this skill can be cancelled freely, the mana that has been consumed will not be returned in full. The more Lu Zhenhua thought about it, the angrier he became, and his attacks became more ruthless. Luzioki's next operation is to turn the endless immortal sword into a big millstone that destroys the world, and grinds the sun trapped in it into powder bit by bit. You can't be like Wang Yanran and be ahead of everyone. Measured left and right, there is nothing more than a dead word. To be honest, he has actually been cultivating the other party as his successor. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 367. The endless stream of swords seemed to be endless, trapping several Ryao in the area where the rules were restricted. Several Waigwaran tried several times to break through Luzioki's encirclement and suppression, but they all ended in failure, and they finally began to panic. Seeing that Ryao in Europe was about to be unable to withstand the endless attacks of Luzioki's immortal sword gang, he couldn't help but roared, "How is that possible? I am Ryao." As he spoke, he seemed to have activated some kind of explosive skill, and a stronger aura suddenly emerged from his body, knocking all the swords around him away. But this ability obviously cannot last long. Sure enough, after only repelling 2 waves of swords, his rising aura quickly declined. But before he could take a breath, the huge wave formed by Jiangang came over again with surging momentum. His pupils shrank, and he quickly tried to fight off the oncoming attack, but perhaps due to excessive consumption, his reaction was always half a beat too slow, and he was about to be swallowed up by the sharp sword. But the next moment, 2 magic arrows detonated on top of him, and the powerful shockwave dispersed the sword. The one who took action was Emily, the only strong person in the sun left in the United States. Her hands almost turned into phantoms, and her swift movements and powerful equipment made her appear much more calm than the others. While dealing with the sword gang attacking her, she also had the mind to pay attention to the situation of other sons, and then provide necessary support at critical moments. Although these 2 arrows do not have the power of rules, and cannot be attached, and they are not charged, their power can only be said to be average. But with the slight obstruction of this arrow, the European strongman could relax and calmly accepted this wave of attacks. Even, with the help of his previous burst of power, they successfully moved a large distance towards the area outside the confinement law. Looking at this situation, as long as they don't make mistakes, they still have a good chance of rushing out. At this critical juncture of life and death, a few crooked nuts couldn't care less about the seemingly incomprehensible intrigues, and could only work together to resist the attack. Several people cooperated sincerely like never before. Faced with this situation, Luzioki's lips revealed a sneer. What they don't know is that Luzioki's immortal sword will become more powerful as time goes by. The longer it is delayed, the better it will be for Luzioki. As the power of Jiangang continues to strengthen, he has cancelled the redundant 10,000 swords returned to the sect. Let the consumption and recovery of sword intent reach a balanced state. And the sword gangs he retained are undoubtedly the most powerful sword gangs that have been fully loaded with the special effects of his passive everything is allowed. It seems that after losing the power of rules, these sunlight warriors are no better than Yuehui adventurers. At least his perception is not much sharper than that of the moonlight adventurer. Because they didn't realize at all that the wave of attacks they dealt with before might have tens of thousands of swords. But now each wave of attacks against Jiangang is only half or even less than the original. Of course they didn't notice it, and Luzioki didn't find it strange at all. Because although the number of sword gangs has decreased, their power is still as amazing as before. It even became scarier than before. At this time, Chen Changshen was actually vaguely aware of this. But he didn't have time to think about what was going on. He was quite selfish and didn't even think of reminding those teammates. The only thing he wanted to do now was to hurry up and get rid of the surrounding sword gang, and then rush outside. As long as the power of rules is restored, no matter how strong Luzioki is now, she is just a piece of meat for him to slaughter. He could even be more ruthless. Annihilate all the sun here in one fell swoop. In this way, wouldn't he be the uncrowned king in this world? Thinking of this, his heart suddenly moved. Without these troublesome guys to check and balance him, wouldn't he be able to happily transform into a citizen of the motherland and do whatever he wants? Even the things he had dreamed about before were no longer that important. But the prerequisite is that he has to rush out. At this moment, Luzioki's lips curved into a faint smile. The time has come. After cancelling a large number of 10,000 swords returning to the sect, Luzioki was able to control the remaining Jian gang much more calmly. 4 words to describe it: handy. However, he did not express this change immediately. Instead, he suppressed his inner emotions and quietly waited for the best opportunity. With the rapid increase in the power of his sword, this opportunity will soon come. This time it was an Asian Sun Yao warrior, who was already annoyed by the endless stream of swords. Because there is no good way to deal with it, I can only passively resist the attack. But he didn't expect that when he raised the stabbing blade in his hand to block as before, he heard a shrill scream from the weapon in his hand. Kaka! Nani! The strong Sun Yao man who had lived a good life was immediately shocked. He watched in disbelief as the weapon in his hand disintegrated. Countless fierce swords broke through the defense and came straight to his face. Its disintegration. Luzioki added the wind form characteristic of power of the 4 poles to Jian gang, disintegrating. The original effect of disintegration is that each attack will have a 100% chance of causing the thing in contact to directly disintegrate. But the opponent's realm was much higher than Luzioki's, and the weapons he used were unusual. After all, how can equipment that can fall into the eyes of Sun Yao experts be simple? Therefore, the probability of collapse is infinitely reduced. But no matter how low it is, this probability always exists. In addition, Luzioki has been secretly controlling Jian gang to strike accurately at the weakest structure of their weapons, opening the eyes of true knowledge. The frequency of attacks against a certain keynote of their weapons is obviously higher than other places. Under this huge Jian gang offensive, it was obvious that they were not aware of this. Combining various factors, this Japanese adventurer who had a good life was obviously less lucky, and the weapon in his hand was destroyed first. Therefore, without exception, the next moment he was completely unable to resist and was swallowed up by the sword. The body of the Japanese Sun Yao warrior, which was several times more powerful than ordinary adventurers, was nothing in front of this domineering and sharp sword. It was shattered to pieces almost in an instant. Rao is a man of extraordinary abilities, and possesses a variety of means to save his life. However, he happened to meet Luzioki. 10,000 swords returned to the clan specializes in overcoming all the bells and whistles. People will die if they are killed. Even Sun Yao experts are no exception. This Sun Yao warrior fell on the spot. The boss caught me today. The next chapter may be a little later. I love you all. Global copy. My talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 368. Ishida Musashi. The few remaining people exclaimed, watching the scene in horror, and a trace of desolation and indignation suddenly emerged in their hearts. As Sun Yao warriors, how had they ever suffered such injustice? 6 of them hit one, but one was killed in turn. The key is, this guy is only at Yuhui level. And before that, Ari Yao had already died in his hands. Although there are many factors involved, it is undeniable that they feel extremely aggrieved and angry for themselves. The European adventurer from before suddenly turned red. Even though he was the weakest among them, he was the first to be unable to withstand Luzioki's attack. In fact, no one dared to mess with him. Because his profession is a berserker known as a mad dog. Although due to various reasons, in order to advance to Sun Yao, he had eliminated part of his berserker bloodline and lost most of his berserker skills. But the restlessness originating from the depths of the soul cannot be erased. So he shouted loudly, and suddenly burst out with fierce arrogance. His short brown hair instantly turned white, and the roots stood upright, and his eyes became blood red. This time he used the secret method seriously. Although he will definitely pay a heavy price afterwards, but now, he only wants to use this increased strength to beat up Lu, who is suspended high in the sky and sitting in the heavens. That majestic momentum, without any movement, bounced away the surrounding swords just by relying on coercion. Everyone was overjoyed and were about to follow him and fight out, but then they looked in shock as he rushed straight towards Lu Xiaoqi. Agendorf! Come back! Everyone screamed in shock, but Agendorf, who was in a bloody rage, obviously couldn't hear any of their words, and rushed forward waving weapons. Lu Xiaoqi raised her eyebrows and looked at him in surprise. Because his form is somewhat similar to the previous big sword girl, it seems to be of the same origin, both are similar to the madness of Kuangzhan but different from it. But obviously Lu Xiaoqi didn't want to study this new species. He flicked his fingers, and countless swords crisscrossed down, and the cold sword light was swayed wantonly. Agendolf's majestic momentum was immediately suppressed by the surging sword. After only 10 steps forward, it was difficult to take a step forward. It's hard to move even an inch. Seeing the current situation, the faces of the remaining crooked nuts suddenly darkened. They were as ugly as bitter melons, green and ugly. In fact, if they can become a strong player in the sun, who will not have one or two tricks in their hands to beat the opponent? Originally, under Lu Xiaoqi's suppression, they were still able to stabilize their mentality and not panic at all. This was the reason. After all, even though I am embarrassed, I haven't really done anything yet. So what if I let you be arrogant for a while? After all, old age is still the best, and I will have the last laugh. The reason why these methods have not been used for a long time is also very simple. Beware of others. Lu Xiaoqi is just Yu Hui. Although it is a bit tricky to deal with him, as long as the power of rules is released, he can be squeezed as much as he wants. But if he exposes his methods in front of other Sun Yao, wouldn't he look much more passive when fighting with these guys in the future? Therefore, they are all stable and no one is in a hurry to make the first move. Until Ishida Musashi, who was living a good life as a child, was carried away without even using his backhand. This time they felt vaguely uncomfortable. Especially after seeing that Agendorf was still no match for Lu Xiaoqi even after using demonization, several people suddenly felt a sense of crisis. Of course, they were also a little pissed off. This Agendolf is indeed a berserker, he has no brains at all. You said that if you used this ability to rush outside, wouldn't a group of us have the opportunity to directly break through the scope of the rules? That's good. I rushed towards Lu Xiaoqi. I had just gone so far when I was almost drowned by someone's barrage attack. But now is not the time to complain about this. They looked at each other and understood each other's thoughts in a rare tacit understanding. A big man from another European country took the lead. He shouted loudly and slapped the ground with both hands, activating his hidden methods. Suddenly the earth trembled, magma spewed out, and the ground was torn apart and began to twist and deform. A huge titan slowly crawled out of the ground. The big man entered the body of the titan and began to control its actions. Lu Xiaoqi's sword gang suddenly became as small as a toothpick compared to the titan, and it didn't feel anything at all when it was poked into someone else's body. Although the scale of the sword gang summoned by someone like him was terrifying, the Titan showed no fear in the face of the incoming sword gangs, allowing them to pass through his body and take away pieces of soil. Because the next moment, it absorbed more power through the ground under its feet to make up for its own shortcomings. Several others also used their best tricks, summoning various gorgeous and cool light effects to bounce Lu Xiaoqi's sword away. But their skills are all explosive. Although they can resist for a while, they cannot resist for a lifetime. We can only rely on the titans to protect everyone and break through crazily to the outside. As for the bloody wrath Dagendorf, they had obviously given up completely. But their choice was also wise. Because the next moment, Agendorf, who was still struggling, was completely overwhelmed by Luzioki's sword. It turned out that this was Luzioki's strategy, which was to lure these crooked nuts to rescue him, so that he could see the loopholes and capture them in one fell swoop. But these selfish guys obviously don't have the idea of sacrificing themselves for others. Seeing that the situation is not good, they turn around and leave, not caring about the life or death of their teammates. Luzioki's plan failed, so he had no choice but to stop hiding his strength and send Agendorf away at once. Several Sun Yao experts used the sudden burst of power to break out. In almost the blink of an eye, they arrived around Chen Changsheng and joined the sword god who was responding to the attack alone. Having one more person will naturally increase your chances of winning. Several people were shocked and continued to break forward. Little did they know that this was Luzioki's premeditated plan, and he deliberately let several people join forces. This way he can allocate all his energy to deal with them with full concentration. Soon they realized something was wrong. Because the remaining few hundred meters were like a chasm surrounded by Luzioki's sword, and it was difficult to cross. Originally, they no longer had to hide their backhand, and they burst out with extremely strong combat power and instantly broke through Luzioki's previous sword gang stranglehold. Then he successfully reunited with Chen Chang'an and joined hands to fight against the enemy. It is obvious that two excellent things overlap together. Why did it become like this? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 369. Did you realize it was wrong now? Late. Luzioki sneered and held his hands in the air, and countless swords flew towards everyone. The originally strong Titan giant was slapped by the sword gang that was as surging as the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers. It was like a paper doll that met a heavy downpour and instantly turned into a pile of waste. These Sun Yao warriors were caught off guard and could only dodge hastily, but unexpectedly, under Luzioki's careful operation, the previously rigid Jian gang became extremely agile, strangled towards them like a fish chasing food. Several screams sounded. The Sun Yao warriors who used to be so high above others were all injured, and some even lost an arm miserably and became gloriously disabled. Seeing Luzioki's sword fell again. Emily, who was holding a giant bow, gritted her teeth, showed a trace of ruthlessness on her face, and shouted, "Cover me." As he spoke, he ignored the incoming immortal sword gang and concentrated on firing his bow and accumulating energy. The bright arrows slowly took shape on the bowstring. The few embarrassed Sun Yao experts had no choice but to put aside their prejudices, cooperate sincerely, and fight against Luzioki's attack at the risk of their lives. Chen Chang'an was also a little embarrassed. Although he has the strongest combat power among everyone due to his proficiency in swordsmanship, he also receives the most attention from Luzioki. Because among everyone, he and Emily pose the greatest threat to Luzioki, so it is natural for them to be taken care of. At this moment, his whole body was scratched several times by the sharp sword. Thanks to his understanding of the sword, he had enough resistance to such sword attacks. Otherwise, it would not be as serious as these injuries that were deeply visible to the bones. Simple. That's the rhythm of being torn into pieces. Facing the new wave of offensive, everyone did not dare to be careless at all and used all their strength to resist Jian Gang. Even so, he still paid a heavier price than before. Emily, who was concentrating the arrows, was unprepared, and the other strong Sun Yao warriors couldn't cope with it, so she was directly penetrated by a sword. If her sun-level body hadn't been strong enough, coupled with her somewhat strange special abilities, she would have hated Northwest on the spot just based on this injury. But after paying such a heavy price, the light arrow in Emily's hand finally took shape. Blood spilled from the corner of her mouth. She gritted her teeth and pointed the bow and arrow at Luzaoki, who was floating high in the air, and slowly let go. Call out. The gorgeous light arrow dragged the streamer with unparalleled power and flew towards Luzaoki at a speed as fast as a jingle bell. Luzaoki just glanced at this, and countless immortal swords stood in front of him, completely cutting off all routes between Guanja and Luzaoki. Clang. Things that are obviously condensed energy emit such a crisp, real sound. After two crisp sounds, the two sword beams were bounced high, and the speed of the light arrow was also frustrated. But after just a moment's pause, it accelerated and moved on. Perhaps because of Jiangang's obstruction, or perhaps because Emily, who was manipulating the arrows from behind, was severely injured and mentally exhausted, the target of this light arrow actually missed the Jiangang set up by Luzaoki, and missed Luzaoki himself. 1,000 miles away, he flew towards a position where it was completely impossible to hit him. Luzaoki's face was still a little stunned at first, but then her expression suddenly changed. Not good. It turned out that the ultimate target of the arrow fired by this woman was not Luzaoki at all, and it was just a pretense to shoot at him. The real target she is aiming at is actually the evil scepter firmly planted on the ground by an invisible position. This scepter seems to have strange abilities in itself. Even after the death of the evil god bishop and the loss of its holder, the abilities it activates are still not affected at all. It can be said that the source of the rules and regulations in this area lies on this scepter. Luzaoki launched such a powerful attack before that he almost beat the bishop into powder, but the scepter he held was not affected at all. From this, it can be concluded that this thing is not so easy to be destroyed, so Luzaoki did not put too much thought on the scepter. At this time, watching Emily attack the scepter, Luzaoki's heart suddenly trembled for some reason, and a bad premonition arose. It's just that the speed of this arrow is no less than the sword gang sent by Luzaoki, and is even slightly faster than the sword gang. By the time Luzaoki reacted, he was unable to intercept the light arrow and could only watch as the two collided quickly. What is very strange is that the encounter between the light arrow and the scepter did not cause any strange phenomena or even make any sound. Guanja was like a professional diver. After a series of perfect operations, he entered the water perfectly, only to create layers of waves on the water surface and merge into it with scattered splashes. Not good. This light arrow didn't seem to cause any changes, but it made Luzaoki feel alarm bells ringing in her heart. He subconsciously retracted all the swords he sent out and took a defensive posture. Turns out his hunch was right. Because the next moment, the scepter lost the support of the mysterious power, swayed slightly, fell to the ground with a snap and hit a few windlass. The rules that were restricted in this area suddenly began to flow. The next moment, several extremely terrifying powers erupted from several embarrassed Ryao. Luzaoki stared at the many sun-level enemies with murderous intent with an ugly expression. The next moment, a clear sword light occupied his entire field of vision. Chen Changsheng took action. As a recognized sword god, his attainments in swordsmanship are well deserved. After regaining his own power of rules, he once again returned to his peak combat power. Even though he looked a bit embarrassed, his momentum and murderous intent became increasingly intense. Almost instantly, all the sword gangs around Luzaoki were knocked away by the opponent. And he himself was penetrated by that powerful sword intent. Other Sun Yao did not take action. With the return of the power of rules, the pride of being Sun Yao also returned to them. If they say that they have to fight many against one at a level far superior to that of their opponent, this is undoubtedly a slap in their own face. Especially hitting Chen Changsheng in the face, who really beat Luzaoki. This sword intention did not kill Luzaoki immediately, but caused him to be severely injured and fell from the air, and was crushed to the ground. The lonely, domineering and ferocious sword intent was eroding his body bit by bit. It felt like he was being tortured to Luzaoki all the time, no less than being cut into pieces with 1,000 swords. Even as the protagonist, the very tough Luzaoki rarely let out a cry of pain, but after just one cry, he gritted his teeth and stopped making any sound. Luzaoki did not give up. Countless sword gangs continued to attack the sword intent that was suppressing him in an attempt to rescue him. He even transformed into the form of the four-pole power and caught the distance from the ground. UN constantly provided him with the strength to resist this cruel sword intention. But hundreds of years of practice have made Chen Changshen's sword rules so pure? How can Lu Zhaoqi, who has not yet entered the country, compete? The reason why he can still persist is because of the special nature of refining some of the five-color sacred stones. Even so, this performance still made Chen Changshen let out an exclamation of surprise. But then he smiled again, with an unspeakable cruelty in his eyes and said, "I never imagined that 100 years from now, the Dragon Kingdom would still be able to produce a swordsman genius like you who has never been seen before." As he spoke, he sighed, "It's true that the waves behind the Yangtze River push the waves ahead. Sorry, the update is late. As everyone knows, I was caught working overtime yesterday, and then someone hosted a dinner for me, and then there was a carnival. Anyway, I was too tired. I fell asleep when I got home last night. Today this chapter was written during my fishing time. There is one more chapter that will be posted a little later, so I beg you guys to forgive me." Global copy, my talent is called Wind Spirit Moon Shadow. Author, Crying Boy Has Bad Luck. Chapter 370. It's true that the waves behind the Yangtze River push the waves ahead. Chen Changsheng sighed. But there was no sympathy or care for the younger generation in his eyes. Some are just endless jealousy and viciousness. Why is it that I, Chen Changsheng, was born with only the blue-level talent of kendo expertise and had to go through thousands of hardships before I could achieve it? But you, Lu Zhaoqi, can be favored by kendo and become a master of kendo at a young age. Achieve such a proud achievement? He didn't know that Lu Zhaoqi was actually a great talent. He regarded Lu Zhaoqi's passive ability as his talent. Why can you, a little Yuehui level, scream in front of so many of us Sun Yao, and still achieve such a heaven-defying record? If Lu Zhaoqi knew his thoughts, she would definitely sneer contemptuously, "Just because I am hanging on the wall. Do you understand the value of the Son of Heaven? Do you understand the art of swordsmanship? Do you understand what Feitian swordsmanship is? What is Jiyi swordsmanship?" Chen Changsheng stepped forward and stepped on Lu Zhaoqi's body, making him groan. He secretly increased his strength, trying to use the rules of swordsmanship to destroy his wisdom and destroy his bones, causing Lu Zhaoqi to stand upright. But Lu Zhaoqi, who has a magical body, managed to survive. Not only did he survive, but he even began to understand his own way of swordsmanship with the help of Chen Changshen's domineering sword rules. Lu Zhaoqi's sword intention has been in existence for a long time. The root cause is that he began to accumulate this wonderful power since the sword drawing technique, the predecessor of 10,000 swords returning to the sect. Later, he acquired a series of passive abilities related to swords, which fully extended his blessing to the art of swordsmanship. However, it is difficult for Lu Zhaoqi, who is always quick to strike, to calm down and concentrate on understanding the way of swordsmanship. Therefore, although Lu Zhaoqi is full of talents in swordsmanship but knows nothing about swordsmanship, he can only rely on his powerful skills to overwhelm others. But now, although he is in a difficult situation, he has come into contact with and felt the so-called sword way more intuitively. It was a little different from what he imagined. In his heart, the sword is a gentleman's weapon. It walks the majestic road and should be upright and upright. But what he realized from Chen Changshen was that he was strange, unpredictable, domineering and cruel. I have to mention that Lu Zhaoqi's impression of swords is naturally due to the subtle influence he received in his motherland in his previous life. Little did he know that in Chen Chang'an's eyes, the sword was just a murder weapon. The longer he masters the art of swordsmanship, the more he discovers that there are limits to the way of swordsmanship. So a long time ago, he no longer adhered to formality and was obsessed with swords. As long as the goal can be achieved, so what if the hand is a sickle, mace, or staff? This still has the charm of everything can be a sword, but it's just gone astray. Since then, his style has become increasingly weird and cunning, vicious, and domineering. People also gradually become paranoid. Faced with this situation, Yi Qianri frowned slightly, and Emily said, "Okay, Chen Changsheng, stop playing around, and quickly take care of him in 2 or 3 times." At this time, nourished by the power of rules, the injuries on her body were suppressed. Although the disembowelment looked very miserable, how strong is the vitality of Sun Yao level? Even though she suffered such heavy injuries, her expression remained normal and her movements were unimpeded. As she spoke, she also cast her gaze on the unconscious Lu Zhenhua, with a cruel smile on her face. After today, there will be no more sunshine in the Dragon Kingdom. Chen Changsheng seemed to have some evil intentions, but instead weakened the infringement on his body, as if he wanted him to witness Lu Zhenhua's death with his own eyes. Lu Zioqi raised her head desperately, just in time to see a vague figure walking towards the crowd step by step. "What are you doing here? Run! Who are you?" Wang Yan ran. This voice turned out to be Lin Qingqing. This Lin Qingqing must be fake. Humph, what a loud tone. Fake. Numerous sunshine? This voice. Lin Qingqing smiled slightly, with a graceful manner, and said gracefully, "Can't you see it?" At this moment, a clear and loud voice appeared on the field. However, his body was tightly controlled by Chen Changsheng using the power of rules, and he could not speak a word at all. Facing 5 suns in front of her, she still had to come up to give her a small moonlight. Lu Zioqi almost closed her eyes, she couldn't bear to see her pig teammate get killed. "You dare to come forward and challenge me in the early stage of one moonlight." As he spoke, he shook his long bow slightly, and a sharp light arrow containing the power of rule slowly emerged. Lu Zioqi. He was worried, was this idiot so arrogant that he lost his mind? Although he couldn't see clearly, based on Lu Zioqi's familiarity with his teammates, he could be sure that this was Lin Qingqing's true identity. However, she found that facing the speeding light arrow, Lin Qingqing showed no fear at all. She just waved the staff in her hand lightly, and a powerful shockwave instantly destroyed the attack. Lu Zioqi was pinned to the ground by Chen Changsheng and could not move. She could only watch with eyes wide open as Emily slowly aimed her attack at Lu Zhenhua, who was seriously injured. If she had this ability, she would have hanged herself up and beaten her, which she has always disliked. When Chen Changsheng saw this scene, his pupils shrank immediately. He didn't care about Lu Zioqi at his feet, pointed his sword at Lin Qingqing, and shouted in a deep voice. Lu Zioqi was even more confused. "I could only watch Lin Qingqing step into this battlefield. After today, there will be no more Sun Yao in the Dragon Kingdom." As she spoke, her eyes sharpened, her fingers loosened, and the light arrow that was about to shoot towards Lu Zhenhua instantly appeared next to Lin Qingqing. Everyone was stunned. "My teammates can't be this strong." A cruel smile appeared at the corner of Emily's mouth. "Are these Yuehui from the Dragon Kingdom so unclear about the situation? Interesting."